ATF did a stupid case against Randy Weaver and then gave it to the marshals. And then the marshals were up, doing recons, and they got in a shootout, killed a dog, and they lost a marshal. Marshal Deegan was killed. And then we had to come in and fix it. Waco was worse. Waco launched a direct assault on a fortified position from an open field and got their ass kicked. And I knew some of those ATF agents, and they were friends of mine. They were good guys, but their commanders totally failed them. I and your wife and her beautiful twin sister could have arrested David Koresh with no problem whatsoever. He went for a jog every day. Wow. And went to the Mag Bag, went to the Dairy Queen. And, instead of going and getting him at the Dairy Queen, he made a frontal assault against a superior position with superior firepower.
Don't be sitting down, king without a crown. No time for hesitation. If I slip, I won't rebound. Look in life and notice I control my own fate. Disappointment stumbles in. How much can my soul take? But I'm doing this for more than me. Live my life accordingly. Know the bigger picture is depicted through the worth I bring. Back to my people, pose a challenge, we can make it. Prefer a dream, catching over all the dream chasing.
Welcome to the Ideas for the Open-Minded TeeCast. Here, we explore social issues with unique people and perspectives through productive conversation while purposefully excluding politicism to promote good standalone ideas. Our guests and our listeners are people with open minds and open ears who seek to learn from others so that we can make this world a better place. So let's do this.
Teaching full school rather than picking the ones we can't build on.
Today's guest is a good friend of mine, good business partner, Danny Coulson. Danny served in the FBI for 31 years. He was the Deputy Assistant Director with responsibility for worldwide terrorism investigations and commanded 4 FBI field divisions. In 1982, he created and commanded the famed FBI Hostage Rescue Team. While there, he commanded operations that led to the recovery of over 275 hostages and trained with the most elite counter-terrorist teams around the world. Notably, he was selected by the FBI director to command the team investigating the Oklahoma City bombing incident, led the Iran-Contra investigation, and was the tactical commander during the Atlanta Prison Riots. Danny retired from the FBI in '97 and now works as a high-level consultant. He regularly appears on network television as an expert on terrorism and violent crime and oversees security operations for major sports organizations and several major corporations throughout the U.S. Danny earned his BA in government from Texas Christian University and a law degree from Southern Methodist University. He solidified a business partnership with Tactical Systems Network in 2013, and he continues to serve clients around the world at the highest level. Let's join the conversation with yet another unique perspective with my buddy Danny Coulson.
How are you, buddy?
I've been good. How are you been, man?
Busier than crap.
Are you?
But good. Yeah. I'm very productive, but busy.
Well, that's good. You working a lot of PI stuff right now?
A lot of, I'm working on the border wall. I got a company that's building on the border wall, so that's driving me crazy. And I've got another op I'm going to go do in the UAE. But frankly, the moneymaker for me is still expert witness stuff. That's all over the place. That's good.
Yeah.
So that's good money.
And it's keeping you from traveling all over the world.
Thank you. Yeah, my trip to the UAE got canceled.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
because of the COVID?
Yeah, they didn't want anybody coming in. So if I went, I'd have to stay in quarantine for 2 weeks. I said, I'm not coming. How's that work for you?
Yeah. Well, you're expensive by the hour to do that for 2 weeks and watch cartoons.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, plus
watch girls with masks on.
And you could be spending your time with your grandkids.
Exactly, which I do a lot of.
I know. So we'll get into talking to some of that too. We've just kind of launched this thing about a month ago and just kind of cover some different topics and stuff. And you being such a good friend, but also preceding our friendship and our working relationship had so many unique experiences. I thought we could easily fill 45, 55 minutes. And then have to do let's continue this into part 4 and 5 until we get to the end of the stories.
Well, we'll do this. I'm in town. If you want to do it again, we can do it. I'm easy.
Well, I just wanted to get us launched, and particularly in light of the stuff that's going on, I kind of wanted to get a couple of perspectives. To launch, I wanted to ask you about specifically some of the changes in law enforcement that you had the privilege to see, because you having worked on the federal end as both a grunt and as a high-ranking soup, and having gone through the times of Ruby Ridge and Waco, and then seeing some of the changes that have happened as a result of those situations going down, and then leading to things like the John Joe Gray and things like that. Can you talk a little bit about how you think law enforcement has changed over the few decades, I guess, since you started your career in the FBI?
Oh my gosh, yes. Tremendous differences. When I was a young agent, we'd arrest a guy with a revolver or something. And then over my career, it went from revolvers to law rockets to automatic weapons to claymore mines to night vision gear and really well-trained terrorists. So in my time, it evolved. And I think now it's even more so, where every time you go arrest somebody, they got an AR or AK. And I think that we're seeing this thing coming from some of these protesters. We want to demilitarize our law enforcement. Well, then that means the bad guys have better guns than we do. That's a huge issue. And I know I dealt with it as a commander. I dealt with it as an operator and as an agent. But I think we're living in the most dangerous time in my lifetime. And I've been around a long time. I think that policemen today have the most dangerous job they've ever had. And I think a lot of it has to do with the rhetoric that's generated by some of these protest groups. So I gave you a very long, convoluted answer there, Tegan. I'm sorry, but I think we're living in dangerous times, and it's gone continually more dangerous since the time I was a brand new street agent.
Do you think a lot of it has to do with the fact that it's so easy to communicate things that are happening in real time, as opposed to so many years back when perhaps it was a lot of things similar going on that you were just unaware of?
That's a really good question. The answer is yes, both through social media and through this 24-hour news we have where everything is on TV. Clearly, I did an operation in the Ozarks against the most heavily armed group ever faced by law enforcement. They were the best that I've ever faced, best anybody's ever faced, and they were as heavily armed as I was, and they were trained, and the media wasn't there. I mean, that's amazing. Think about that. This group that had hostages and a huge standoff with hundreds of people, and nobody knew about it until it was over, until they walked out. So you're not going to see that today. And it worked in my favor, by the way, because I didn't get compromised, and the media didn't compromise my op. But now it's totally different. Your question is right on point. That social media, Facebook, I mean, now criminals are recording their crimes on Facebook, and that may be part of the motive. So, yeah, you're right on point. It's a big part of it.
Well, was the experience you're talking about? I assume it's wasn't a classified operation or anything at the time or now. And what was it? Were you as an operator or supervisor?
No, I was a commander. It was a group called the CSA. It was the group that ultimately blew up the Murrah building. It was the same organization that they planned to kill judges and kidnap United States attorneys, and they had hostages, and they were the ones. They had a tank, and when I got that mission, I was called to headquarters, and they described it, and I went, "Oh, yeah, okay, when can I leave? When do I start?" And it took a month to do it because of all the prep and the recons, and some of us swam in, some of us roped in, and some of us walked in. And it was in the middle of the Ozarks, Mountain Home, Arkansas, and on Bull Shoals Lake. And in fact, I used Bull Shoals Lake as an avenue of approach for my boats. So yeah, that was a huge, huge deal. And guess what? Everybody lived. I didn't kill anybody.
Well, that's already admirable, considering the leverage that you had to use that against anybody that that would have been combative, obviously, because this was with HRT, I assume.
Yeah, it was. And what's interesting? The deputy commander of that group actually was pretty helpful during the siege. And he goes to jail for a long time, and he comes out and he calls me. He wants to meet with me. And I said, I'll bet you do. So anyway, the interesting part about it is that he's become a dear friend. our wives are friends. He comes to our house for parties, and he comes to my kids' weddings and graduations and things. And he turned his life around. He found Christ and is now a minister. And
Wow.
It's kind of a great little story. I mean, when I went to meet with him after our first meeting, he said, "I'm glad I didn't kill you." I said, "I'm glad I didn't kill you either."
Well, that's amazing.
That was a good, distinct possibility, because I mean, I had such unbelievable sniper coverage on him. We could have taken most of them out in about a second. But we fortunately, I think we had really good negotiations, and we had good negotiators, and it was a really, really good op, and nobody knows about it, which is the way it should be.
That is incredible. Was that post Waco, Ruby Ridge, all that stuff, I assume?
No, it was before.
Was it before?
Waco.
Okay. Yeah, because that was the other thing I wanted to touch on is for the people that obviously, I mean, it's difficult for anyone who's not experiencing it to speak with any kind of a proper EDU, because we only know, what we're allowed to know, or what the media reports or whatever. So
right.
But we did see a lot of changes in the way that the FBI specifically changed some of their tactics after Ruby Ridge fell apart, and the Waco, and obviously you had a lot of your hands in a lot of that stuff, so you experienced that on different levels as well. So, what do you think was the difference? Is it just a matter of who's leading these teams, or is it just the teams running rogue within the organization?
No. I think that was a significant leadership problem. I did not do either one of those cases. I was at headquarters as a deputy at the time, and when Ruby Ridge went down, I told the executive assistant director, I said, let me do this. He said, no, you don't do this anymore. So they sent people who didn't do that for a living. And I think that sounds maybe somewhat self-serving, but they should have sent. There were 2 HRT commanders at headquarters didn't go, and that'll kind of tell you.
Yeah, and I don't think it's self-serving. That's kind of actually why I asked, because I know what you're capable of, and I know your ego's in check, and
thank you.
And I also have had the same experience where very few can represent the entire organization by a few flubs, and it changes the culture completely.
Well, it really does. Well, one thing, Tegan, about both of those, they were both other people's FUBARs. That wasn't our case. ATF did a stupid case against Randy Weaver, and they gave it to the marshals, and then the marshals were up, doing recons, and they got in a shootout, killed a dog, and they lost the marshal. Marshal Deegan was killed. And then we had to come in and fix it. Waco was worse. Waco launched a direct assault on a fortified position from an open field and got their ass kicked. And I knew some of those ATF agents, and they were friends of mine. They were good guys, but their commanders totally failed them. I and your wife and her beautiful twin sister could have arrested David Koresh with no problem whatsoever. He went for a jog every day.
Wow.
And went to the Mag Bag, went to the Dairy Queen. And, instead of going and getting him at the Dairy Queen, they made a frontal assault against a superior position with superior firepower. And they got, I'll tell you a scary thing about that. The Marshal Service, they fought valiantly. I mean, the operators did it. They fought. I give them a lot of credit.
Yeah.
Their commanders should never have put them there. But here's the interesting part about it. At the end of the day, I think they had a total of 20 rounds among all of them. And Koresh had hundreds. If he had assaulted them, it'd all been dead. Think about that.
Yeah, that is not a surprise, but it's amazing. And the reason why I wanted to just kind of flush some of that out is because of the perception that comes out when an event like that occurs, especially one that, like you said, gets into the middle of the media's eye and everybody's watching it unfold. It's even worse. And I'm fairly certain that I speak for a lot of people when I say I think the FBI was dinged for both of those.
Oh, they were. Oh, you're right. Clearly. There's no doubt about that. And you know what? We just got the short straw, and we didn't start it. And when I did not go there. I was at headquarters. They wouldn't let me go. But when those agents went to face that, what did they have to offer David Koresh? Come out and be executed? What was in their quiver to
maybe
negotiate?
Maybe heavy metal CDs.
Exactly. I mean, he was going to stay in there, have relations with little girls, and drink whiskey, and that's what he did.
Yeah.
And then finally, when we put the tear gas in, or the agents did, he set it on fire and burned them all up. And then what's his name? Steve Snyder shot and killed him. So yeah, that was a bad day. That was not a good thing. And I'll tell you a little anecdote. Charles Beckwith, the first commander of Delta, was a good friend. He helped me a lot when I started the HRT. He told me one night, he said, "Danny, don't be afraid that your uppers will give you an impossible mission, because your men will figure out how to do it. Your biggest fear is that you get a failed tactical mission from another unit, for you will forever be tarred with the brush of their failure." And that was very prophetic. And I can remember like it was yesterday. Yeah, he told me that, and I'm thinking, oh my God, Ruby Ridge, Waco. Exactly, Charlie, you were a genius, and unfortunately, we fell into that trap.
No question. So how do you weigh what's happening to law enforcement these days? Then it's more municipal at this point, which is just better for the FBI. But municipal law enforcement's going through a lot of these things that I think we've had discussions about this before.
Yes.
Obviously not on mic, but in terms of, first of all, recognizing, I think we both concede that the issue is real and it is legitimate. It's just perceived as perhaps rampant. I don't know, Fort Worth's running 1,800 officers. So if you even have 100 bigots in that group, we're going to have major issues.
Yeah.
How would you approach this as someone, as a leader? How would you approach something like this?
Okay. I work with police officers literally around the world. I mean, I go all over the world doing jobs, and here in Texas and throughout the United States, Central South America, Canada. I'm with cops all the time. I don't think there's a racial systemic problem at all. I think sometimes you get a bad guy, and the officer that killed Mr. Floyd, I saw the look in his eye, and I think if I'd have been there, I think I would have overwhelmed to the point where I would have rushed him, knocked him off that guy. They'd probably shot me or whatever, but he was murdering him, and it was clear he was killing him.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's a training issue. I don't think it's a systemic racism issue. I think it's a murder issue. And I'll add this: as the deputy assistant director, I ran the civil rights program for the FBI. I prosecuted those officers that attacked Rodney King. I put them in jail. I went after them with a vengeance, and we convicted all of them. All but one in federal court. And I really do believe that justice is necessary in situations like that. And I was really angry when I saw that. I mean, I'm out of the business now. I don't do that anymore. But I was angry when I saw it, and understand people being angry. But the other side of it is that is not justification for arson, murder, and destroying black businesses. And I think that's what we need to look at. Right now, I think most of our problems are coming from Antifa. Antifa is clearly a Marxist group, and we know they're stirring up all these problems. And I'm really critical of the FBI right now for not going after them. There's a classic RICO violation that we could put on those guys that could basically make them toe the line and be punished for the crimes they've committed. It's a crime to set a fire. It's a crime to commit arson and riot, and we're not addressing that. And I think that city leaders need to buck up and say, if you commit a crime in my town, you're going to jail. End of story. And then don't arrest them for rioting and let them all go tomorrow. What deterrent is that? I think the idea that we bring police back in and not let them enforce the law, that's horrible. That just emboldens the bad guys. And I see value. My son's a policeman, and he's a policeman out in Oregon, where I commanded the FBI division for a period of time. And he and I talk every day. And, I think I was not really a fan of community policing, but I think we need to rethink that. I think we need to put the policemen in the community with the city leaders. And so they know these policemen are human beings and they care about them, and not listen to Marxists and revolutionaries who want to drive a wedge between all of us and destroy our society.
Those folks should be just as accountable as the law enforcement folks. Part of the problem, I wonder if you would agree, is that the sentiment inside the police departments, where you've got the thin blue line, you've got people that refuse to acknowledge unless it's so grotesque as Minneapolis. But you have bad police shootings, and you talk to most police officers, and because I get the brunt of this too. Everyone calls me when these things go down.
I'm sure they do.
And I'll call it what it is part of the reason why they keep calling me, because I don't have a tendency to defend the police regardless. And the police have a higher level of accountability by taking that oath and taking the training that they do. Same way that you and I deal with the protection and security side, on the civilian side even. There's a higher level of accountability. And if you screw it up, you've got to be able to call it what it is, because what's happening is when police stand behind a bad cop, then you can't push people to look at it as an individual action, because you still have the department that's standing behind them, or you have some kind of civil service law that, where the chief calls that a totally gives them the boot, and then they end up getting the job back because of a civil service law, or
he goes to another department.
Yeah, so or he can get his job back at the same department. And then you're dealing with somebody that's this jackass that you just kicked out that's getting his job back, and you have to basically survive with this guy on your squad. I can't imagine that from a private perspective. If I fired somebody for doing something totally insubordinate, and then they get their job back because of some union or something, I would go berserk. But I think part of it might be that, and I don't know if the FBI ran the same way or if your son's department does the same way. But I see a lot of that. Like back in the blue is something that you do, even if it's borderline illegal. What you just witnessed, they're just going to back the blue because that's what they do.
Yeah, well, that is a problem. With regard to the FBI, we're not civil service. They can just fire us, get rid of us. There's certain veterans' preferences, but they don't amount to much. I think the FBI is harder on themselves than any outside agency would ever be. The agents are pretty brutal when it comes to one of their own. They go after them pretty hard, excluding James Comey, and that would be a subject for maybe another evening for us. But I have strong feelings about that too. Here's the way I feel about it. I mentioned to you earlier that I ran the civil rights program for the FBI, and if the level of the misconduct raises to a certain level, then the FBI investigates, and there are statutes that are called color of office, and that means that if I, as a policeman or an FBI agent, I deny you your constitutional rights, then that's a criminal offense, and we put people in jail for that. And I think that's kind of the bottom line with it. I think that most chiefs now understand, or they should understand, that if you got a bad cop, you got to get rid of them. When I was the disciplinarian for the FBI for a period of time, and I had an agent that violated the law, I went after him hammer and tongs. I didn't give a damn what he was.
Yeah.
And that's the way it needs to be, because you know what? What's more important than anything is your oath to the Constitution. You swear that oath, and I take that very seriously, and I did many, many years ago. And the Constitution means you follow it. The Constitution doesn't mean you don't like the way a guy looks, you beat him up because he's black or Hispanic or or whatever, or transgender, because you get him and whip up on him. Well, that's federal violation to do that. And I think that's where we need to go. I just don't feel, though, that there is systemic racism in law enforcement. Because New York City is primarily minority. A lot of people don't know that. There are more minorities in the NYPD, and there are white guys and women. So I think as the demographics change, as more and more minority people becoming involved in law enforcement, I think you'll see a huge improvement.
Yeah, we've got to get them more involved, and I think over the decades, and you could probably agree, when you go back into the 60s and the 50s and the 40s, I mean, they were jailing minorities at will over pretty much whatever. and even into the, even when I went in the mid 90s and started working in law enforcement, there were some things done back then that would never survive the day.
No.
So I think part of it is just that it's kind of practices that get handed down until somebody's finally held accountable. I think bringing in a lot of the cameras and the accountability in that regard helps.
I think cell phones help a lot.
Obviously, I think they help a lot.
I think they do, yeah.
But the other thing that I've thought of is that I don't think that getting an absolute squeaky clean person is helping to bring people into a community that they feel familiar with. If you have somebody that comes in that smoked weed 2 years ago, then they've got to wait 3 years to apply. I'm a nerd, so I'm not being condescending at all, but you get some kind of square nerd to become a cop, and then you expect them to assimilate into a community full of crime and have them be compassionate and understanding, and also have the confidence to handle something that is significantly different than they've ever experienced before. You go through a police academy and ask who's been in a street fight, and you only have out of 35, 40 people, you've got 7 or 8 people that have been in a street fight. What good is that? I mean, the first time you get pummeled, what are those people going to do? It's not going to be very proper. They're going to panic and have to do something extraordinary, and then you've got a whole new set of circumstances. So I think it does go deeper.
I think that's a really super point. It's probably the strongest thing we've said tonight. You have to have confidence to be a cop or an FBI agent. And my son is a policeman. He's a very aggressive canine officer. And he tells me that a lot of the officers you're getting today, he said the same thing you did. They didn't play sports. Nobody ever punched them in the nose. And when something happens, a lot of them resort to more force than they should. In my business, the counterterrorism business, the people that shoot the least people are people that are the best trained. I know that sounds kind of crazy, but if you have a lot of experience and you've arrested a lot of really bad guys, you don't have to use too much force. You know how to do it.
Yeah.
And you finesse them, or you use speed, surprise, and violence of action and take them out without killing them. And I think that bringing in timid people that have never been punched in the nose or had a fight, that's not going to bode well for us. Because if you think about it, and I think this is important, you can have a very successful career as a law enforcement officer or an FBI agent and never do anything, just coast. Because if you do something, you got a chance of being criticized, especially today. Mm-hmm. Like those officers in Atlanta that were indicted for murder for shooting a guy that was using a taser on. That's law, state law. A taser in the state of Georgia is considered the same thing as a pistol. And I think that there's a combination of things working that right now we're in kind of a transition period, and it's not going to be good for us, I'm afraid.
Yeah, that Atlanta situation is a whole nother set too, and I'm not going to get into stuff that's going to end up being minutia. But obviously, we have also the need to kind of distinguish some of these groups too. And I don't know what you feel about some of the, even as the protests began and you had looting for about a week, and then the looting subsided and the protests began. I assume that the protests are something that we want to support since it's constitutional, and we're just trying
to First Amendment, of course.
Yeah, so we're trying to make distinguish the two to make sure that we're upholding that part of the law, and then just ensure that law enforcement's equally accountable. But on the other side of the coin of what we just talked about is, if you find too many guys that have tried cocaine twice and been in 4 street fights, it's also going to be a little bit hypocritical for them to spend the rest of their career enforcing the law. So there is kind of a fine line. I just think they need to loosen their belt a little bit.
Well, I think most departments now have some exceptions for marijuana use. I know the FBI does. I mean, it's not much. I mean, you'll get much of a break with it. Yeah. I think that's probably the smart thing to do. I've never smoked a joint in my entire life. It's probably one of the few things in the world I could pass a polygraph on. I've never tried it. But, it's a different world.
That's impressive. I'm fine with what we got, man.
Okay, let's do it again. Call me again. I'll do it at the same time. It's fun.
Okay.
You are a good interviewer. I enjoyed it.
I love it, man. It's great talking to you as always.
All right, thanks. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.
Many a fool can a kingdom rule as long as they don't look back. Don't look back now. It's clean and cool what you learned in school. It's hard work over fact. Freedom, gotta get free now. Welcome to the some who don't be sitting down yet.
Happily do this for those before and after me, trying to pass the baton forward like I'm athletes. Took mine and ran with it, now I'm thinking about the next generation. Give them a platform for progress. Butterfly effect, coming live and direct. Ain't no telling how our decisions will manifest. I ain't crying for help, I can do this on my own.